Hi, welcome to Resist Radio. My name is Jacob Ingram, and I launched this weekly podcast to discuss the rise of Christian nationalism in the United States, whether it be through Republicans, the court system, the White House, or through organizations such as the Heritage Foundation. Make no mistake about it, Christian nationalism has one goal, and one goal only: to create a privileged white upper class and disenfranchise those who they think don't need a seat at the table. I want to start with the State Bill of the Week, which comes to us from Texas this week. It is TXHCR 59, and it is designating April as Promise Month for a 10-year period ending in 2035. Now I'm going to read the bill. Whereas God keeps his promises, and the Lord your God is God and faithful to keep his promises for all time to come. And whereas the promises of God are stated thusly in the Gospel of John. And this goes on and on and on. And it is such a blatant disregard for the Establishment Clause for a state to declare a month the Promise Month. I mean, keep in mind, this is just my opinion, but are you kidding? This is no different than the pandering that all the states that signed on the amicus brief supporting the end of birthright citizenship. It's like everyone is vying to be the favorite child of the Heritage Foundation and the Trump administration. And I mean, on top of that, you've got Oklahoma forming its own Doge. Doge, okay. And I'll talk more about that next week, as well as spotlight Dusty Devers and Ryan Walters. And I want to move on to really what I wanted to talk about today. And keep in mind that this podcast is meant to be very short. It's meant to be strictly informational. And I did this podcast this way and made it so short so that people wouldn't be bothered by listening to the whole thing. Nobody wants to log on and listen to me talk about the stuff for 90 minutes. If they do, I'd gladly do that. But this is the strategy that I'm trying right now. I think that a major problem for Democrats is their messaging. I don't think it's aggressive enough, and I don't think there's a cohesive strategy behind the messaging. They're all over the place. Instead of everyone constantly looking for zingers all the time in the press, there needs to be a national cohesive strategy calling out what is going on. We don't spend enough time focusing on the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, which, by the way, has moved on to the implementation phase. We need to talk about the nuttiest stuff we can find in that document at every opportunity. We need to make the White House and Republicans absolutely inseparable from Project 2025. I mean, people hated Project 2025 during the election, and they still do. Nobody wants a group of religious nut jobs making decisions that affect your personal life, period. They just don't. And my complaint with that is that you don't hear them talk about it anymore. They need to be acting like an opposition party. They need to jump on every single item that comes out. But we don't have anybody doing that. Everybody sits around wringing their hands. Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, for one, we have to respond. And we need to quit vying for a voter that doesn't exist anymore. Those people aren't looking for an adult in the room. They were looking for somebody who promised to make their lives better. Now, in my opinion, they were deceived and used and lied to by Republicans and the Trump administration, because nothing that is going on is going to make the life of the American worker better, period. And I would really like to see messaging like they were doing before the assassination attempt. I mean, I realized that was a needed moment to tone down the rhetoric. But we need to be talking about things like the end of democracy, oligarchy, Musk's government, and it needs to be as aggressive as possible. I don't think that the rhetoric had anything to do with what happened in Pennsylvania. And I'll add this too. The people we're fighting are their own worst enemies. They constantly want to do unpopular things. They have lines they throw out to gain the support of the average American, and then they get in office and do the exact opposite. And some Democrats are guilty of that too, really. I mean, there is no data-driven policy anymore. And honestly, we're not about helping people. They're Republicans, I mean, in the way we're going. But we should be. We should be about helping people. We should be about helping those that are constantly the downtrodden or the worst off. I mean, I honest to God think that we should just sit down and state that being fed is a human right, period. And I would go farther and argue that the right to have somewhere to sleep that's safe and indoors is a human right too. And I know how that sounds to Republicans. They want to scream welfare. You know, I don't understand it, honestly. I don't see how anyone could be that unempathetic to the worst off in our society. But that's a talk for another time. Democrats need to step up their messaging, period. And they need to start hitting some home runs on these give-me's. I mean, you could sit up there and rail about the stuff that's going on. But we don't. We just sit around. We have personal fights in Congress. We don't get up and talk about the issues in a way that makes sense to most people. Well, anyways, that's all I've got for this initial episode. Any constructive criticism or comments would be great. Just leave them in the comments below if you want to. And I'll talk at you next week. Have a good evening.